The scanner beeped 3 times, then fell silent. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez looked at the screen, his smirk faltering as the display flickered from green to amber, then blazed crimson. Level 7 clearance. His eyes darted from the monitor to the woman standing before him, her weathered flight jacket hanging loose over civilian clothes, gray streaking through black hair tied in a simple ponytail. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to wait here," Rodriguez stammered, his earlier condescension evaporating like morning mist. The red alert had triggered something deeper in the system, protocols he'd never seen activated in his 3 years manning the gate at Nelly's Air Force Base. The woman said nothing, just nodded slightly, her dark eyes holding secrets that seemed to weigh more than the Nevada mountains surrounding them. 20 minutes later, Colonel Marcus Webb arrived in person, still buttoning his dress uniform. He'd been pulled from a briefing about the mysterious aircraft incursions along the Pacific coast, unmarked fighters appearing on radar for seconds before vanishing, leaving only electromagnetic shadows and confused air traffic controllers. The same phantoms that had been haunting military installations from Alaska to California for the past 6 months. "Callisto," Webb said quietly, using a call sign that hadn't been spoken aloud in classified circles for over a decade. The woman turned, and for a moment something flickered behind her composed exterior, recognition, perhaps regret. "Colonel," she replied, her voice carrying the distinctive rasp of someone who'd spent years breathing recycled cockpit air at 40,000 feet. "Didn't expect the welcome wagon." Webb studied her face, nodding the new lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her left hand that she tried to hide by keeping it in her jacket pocket. Aurora Callisto Reeves. The name existed in files so classified that even mentioning them required congressional oversight. The pilot who'd flown missions that officially never happened, in aircraft that technically didn't exist. "Walk with me," Webb said, dismissing Rodriguez with a look that could melt steel. As they moved deeper into the base, past hangars that housed America's most advanced fighters, neither spoke of what they both knew, that Callisto's return wasn't coincidence. The phantom aircraft, the electromagnetic anomalies, the increasing boldness of whatever force was testing American airspace. It all pointed to something larger, something that required the kind of pilot who understood that some battles were fought in the spaces between what was possible and what was necessary. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of jet fuel and the electric promise of storms gathering beyond the horizon. In the distance, an F-22 Raptor screamed skyward, its engines painting contrails against the endless blue, unaware that its pilot was about to become part of a story much larger than routine training flights. The war room deep beneath Nelly's hummed with activity, banks of monitors displaying radar sweeps, satellite imagery, and classified intelligence reports that painted a troubling picture. Webb led Callisto through corridors lined with portraits of aviation legends, men whose achievements had been measured in confirmed kills and successful missions. None of them had faced what was coming. "The incursion started 6 months ago," Webb explained, pulling up a holographic display that showed the western coastline dotted with red markers. "First contact was off the Aleutians. Our F-35 scrambled to intercept what AWACS called multiple unknown aircraft. By the time they reached the coordinates, nothing. No heat signatures, no debris, no explanation." Callisto studied the data, her expression unreadable. She'd seen similar patterns before, in theaters of operation that existed only in redacted files. The systematic probing, the careful escalation, the technological sophistication that suggested an adversary who understood American capabilities better than America understood theirs. "Show me the electromagnetic data," she said, ignoring Webb's surprised look. Most pilots wouldn't know to ask about M signatures, but Callisto wasn't most pilots. She'd spent years flying aircraft that existed at the intersection of physics and impossibility, where electromagnetic warfare was as crucial as traditional kinetics. The display shifted, revealing wavelength patterns that defied conventional analysis. The signatures weren't consistent with known aircraft, Russian, Chinese, or otherwise. They pulsed with a rhythm that suggested advanced stealth technology, but something more sophisticated than anything in current intelligence estimates. Our best analysts think it's next-generation adaptive camouflage, Webb continued. The aircraft somehow matched the electromagnetic background of their environment, becoming effectively invisible to our sensors. But there's something else, he paused, highlighting a specific frequency band. These pulses occur in mathematical sequences, Fibonacci, prime numbers, occasionally something that looks like attempts at communication. Callisto moved closer to the display, her fingers unconsciously tracing patterns in the air as she processed the information. She'd encountered similar technology once before, during a mission that had required her to sign documents promising that acknowledging its existence would result in immediate incarceration. The memory brought with it the phantom taste of recycled oxygen and the weight of G-forces that had pushed her consciousness to its limits. "They're not trying to communicate," she said finally. "They're mapping our response capabilities. Every time we scramble fighters, they learn more about our reaction times, deployment patterns, electronic countermeasures. This isn't reconnaissance, it's preparation." The room fell silent except for the steady hum of cooling systems and the distant rumble of aircraft engines. Webb watched Callisto's face, recognizing the expression of someone who'd seen the future and found it wanting. Outside, the Nevada sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that would soon give way to the star-filled darkness where wars were increasingly fought. Major Elena Vasquez had been flying F-22 Raptors for 8 years when the scramble order came through. "Ghost lead, this is Sierra Control. We have multiple unknowns bearing 270, Angels 30, approximately 200 nautical miles west of Point Reyes. You are cleared to intercept and identify." "Copy Sierra Control, Ghost lead acknowledging." Vasquez banked her Raptor into a climbing turn, the twin Pratt and Whitney engines responding instantly to her inputs. Behind her, 3 more F-22s formed up in combat spread formation, their angular silhouettes cutting through the afternoon sky like mechanical predators. The flight to the intercept coordinates took 18 minutes. Vasquez kept her radar in passive mode, relying on data link from the E-3 Sentry orbiting safely behind them. The AWACS painted a confused picture, contacts that appeared and vanished, altitude readings that fluctuated impossibly, speed estimates that ranged from subsonic to hypersonic within seconds. "Ghost lead Sierra Control. Contacts are now showing as 4 distinct aircraft in diamond formation, maintaining Angels 35, course steady at 090. Ghost lead copies, switching to active radar." Vasquez flipped the toggle, and her APG-77 radar began painting the sky ahead with invisible energy. The display remained stubbornly empty. Whatever was out there had electromagnetic properties that made it nearly transparent to her sensors. "Sierra Control, Ghost lead. Negative contact on active radar. Continuing to intercept coordinates." The first visual contact came at 12 nautical miles. Vasquez caught a glint of reflected sunlight, a brief sparkle against the deep blue that shouldn't have been there. She adjusted her heading slightly, bringing her nose toward the anomaly, and suddenly they were there, 4 aircraft unlike anything in her recognition training. They were sleek, almost organic in their curves, with no visible engine intakes or exhaust ports. The surfaces seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury, adapting to the changing light conditions in real time. No national markings were visible, no identification numbers, nothing that would indicate their origin or purpose. "Sierra Control, Ghost lead has visual contact on 4 unknown aircraft. They appear to be..." Vasquez paused, struggling to find words for what she was seeing. The unknown aircraft had noticed her formation and were beginning a turn that defied her understanding of aerodynamics. No G-forces, no visible control surfaces, just a smooth pivot that brought them nose to nose with her flight. Ghost lead described the aircraft. Sierra Control I. They don't match any known configuration, requesting permission to close for positive identification. The response came not from Sierra Control, but from a voice she didn't recognize, encrypted on a frequency that her radio shouldn't have been able to receive. Ghost lead, this is Callisto. Maintain distance and do not, repeat, do not attempt intercept. These aircraft are not hostile, but engagement protocols will activate if you approach within 5 nautical miles. 27 years earlier, Lieutenant Aurora Reeves had been the youngest pilot ever selected for the Aurora project, a black program so classified that its existence was denied by officials who had signed the orders authorizing it. The aircraft she flew didn't have an official designation. It was simply called the platform, a vehicle that existed at the bleeding edge of human technology and something that might have been beyond it. The platform was beautiful in the way that only perfect engineering could be beautiful. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and when Aurora sat in its cockpit, she felt less like a pilot and more like a component in something larger than herself. The controls responded to thought as much as touch, and after her first flight, she understood why the psychological screening for Aurora project had been more intensive than the physical requirements. Callisto, you are cleared for test flight 77 Alpha, came the voice of Dr. Sarah Chen, the project director whose genius had made the platform possible. Remember, we're testing the new electromagnetic field generators today. If you experience any unusual sensations, abort immediately and return to base. Aurora had smiled at that, her hand already caressing the throttle that wasn't quite a throttle. Everything about flying the platform was unusual. The sensation of moving through space without the familiar vibrations of jet engines, the way electromagnetic fields seemed to bend reality around the aircraft, the moments when she could swear she was seeing things that hadn't happened yet. Copy control, Callisto is ready for departure. The platform lifted off without sound, rising on fields of manipulated energy that made conventional physics seem quaint. As Aurora climbed through the atmosphere, she felt the familiar expansion of consciousness that came with platform flights, a sensation the doctors couldn't explain and the physicists refused to acknowledge. At 60,000 feet, something went wrong. Not mechanically, the platform systems remained nominal, but Aurora began receiving data that shouldn't have existed. Her heads-up display showed aircraft formations that weren't there, radio frequencies that broadcast messages in languages that hadn't been invented. Through the cockpit canopy, she could see the curve of the Earth, but also something else, ghostly images of aircraft that looked almost like the platform but different, evolved. Control, Callisto, I think I'm seeing other aircraft. Advanced configuration, unknown origin. The radio crackled with static before Dr. Chen's voice came through. Aurora, return to base immediately. Do not acknowledge any external contacts. But Aurora was already reaching out with the platform's sensors, trying to make contact with the Phantom aircraft. The response was immediate and overwhelming, a flood of information that felt less like data transmission and more like direct neural interface. Images of wars fought with weapons that bent space-time, of civilizations that had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, of a timeline where humanity's choices would determine whether they joined the community of advanced species or destroyed themselves in ignorance. When Aurora finally landed the platform, she was changed. The doctors noticed it immediately. Enhanced spatial reasoning, improved reaction times, and most disturbingly, an apparent ability to predict electromagnetic phenomena before they occurred. The platform had somehow linked her consciousness to something larger, something that existed in the spaces between dimensions where advanced physics met technologies that resembled magic. The Aurora project was terminated 3 months later, its files sealed under classifications that would outlast the careers of everyone involved. Aurora Reeves was reassigned to conventional aircraft, her extraordinary abilities carefully monitored but never again utilized. The platform was disassembled, its components scattered to research facilities around the globe where their true purpose would be forgotten. But Aurora remembered. She remembered the sensation of touching infinity, of seeing through time, of understanding that humanity's technological development was being watched by intelligence that had transcended the limitations of single-planet existence. And now, 27 years later, those watchers had returned, and they had remembered her too. The briefing room at Nellie's had been cleared of all personnel except those with Level 7 clearance or higher. Aurora sat at the head of the conference table, her hands folded calmly as she studied the faces around her. Military officers whose careers had been built on managing the impossible, intelligence analysts who specialized in threats that didn't officially exist, and scientists whose understanding of physics extended into realms that challenged human comprehension. The entities we're dealing with aren't hostile in any conventional sense, Aurora began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had touched the infinite and returned with knowledge that few humans could comprehend. They're evaluators, sent to assess humanity's technological and social development. The electromagnetic signatures we've been tracking are scanning devices, mapping our capabilities and measuring our potential for integration into larger communities. General Patricia Hawkins, commander of Air Force Special Operations, leaned forward. Integration. Are you telling us we're being recruited? More like interviewed, Aurora replied. The species that send these evaluators have learned that technological advancement without corresponding social evolution leads to self-destruction. They're determining whether humanity has developed sufficient wisdom to handle the responsibilities that come with truly advanced capabilities. Dr. James Morrison, the Pentagon's chief physicist, shook his head. This is unprecedented. We're talking about first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, and you're discussing it like it's a job application. Aurora's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Memories of flying through space that folded like origami, of communications that occurred faster than light, of technologies that made nuclear weapons seem as primitive as stone axes. Dr. Morrison, what would you call a species that develops interstellar travel, quantum manipulation, and consciousness expansion technology? Because that's where we're headed, and the question is whether we get there through cooperation or conquest. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't invaders or conquerors. They were teachers, waiting to see if humanity was ready for graduation to a higher level of existence. The electromagnetic probes, the systematic scanning of military installations, the careful avoidance of direct confrontation, all of it was assessment rather than aggression. What do they need from us? Colonel Webb asked. Proof that we can transcend our biological limitations without losing our essential humanity, Aurora replied. The platform, the aircraft I flew during the Aurora project, was designed with their guidance. They've been subtly influencing human technological development for decades, waiting for us to develop sufficient understanding to make contact viable. She stood and moved to the holographic display, manipulating the controls with a familiarity that suggested intimate knowledge of systems that had been classified above her clearance level. The display showed a three-dimensional map of local space, with trajectory lines indicating movement patterns that extended far beyond Earth's solar system. They're not from here, she continued. Their civilization spans multiple star systems, connected by technologies that manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time. They've seen species like us before, young civilizations standing at the threshold between planetary and cosmic existence. Some make the transition successfully. Others, she paused, highlighting areas of empty space where stellar cartography suggested planets should exist. Others don't. The weight of cosmic responsibility settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Humanity was being evaluated not just as a species, but as potential members of an interstellar community that had responsibilities and obligations extending far beyond Earth's atmosphere. The choice wasn't between war and peace. It was between evolution and extinction. Major Vasquez's voice crackled over the secure radio frequency as her F-22 maintained formation with the mysterious aircraft. Callisto, Ghost Lead. The unknowns are adjusting course toward our position, requesting instructions. Aurora's response came from the command center beneath Nellie's, her words carrying the weight of authority that transcended conventional military hierarchy. Ghost Lead, maintain current heading and altitude. Do not attempt to match their maneuvers. Your aircraft isn't designed for the G-forces they can generate. They're initiating the next phase of the evaluation. Through her cockpit canopy, Vasquez watched the unknown aircraft execute a series of maneuvers that defied every principle of aerodynamics she'd learned. They moved like thoughts made manifest, changing direction without regard for momentum or inertia, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that seemed to communicate meaning beyond human comprehension. Ghost Lead, you're about to experience direct contact, Aurora continued. Don't resist. The interface is designed to work with human consciousness, but it requires voluntary participation. Think of it as a conversation that happens faster than words. The lead unknown aircraft moved closer, coming within 50 meters of Vasquez's Raptor. As it approached, she felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the air itself was becoming charged with potential energy. Her instrument displays flickered, showing readings that couldn't possibly be accurate, fuel levels that exceeded her tank's capacity, engine temperatures that registered below ambient flight data that indicated she was simultaneously at multiple altitudes. Then the contact began. It wasn't telepathy in any science fiction sense. It was more like having her consciousness temporarily expanded to encompass multiple streams of information simultaneously. She saw her own aircraft through sensors that registered electromagnetic spectra she'd never imagined, felt the gravitational fields of nearby celestial bodies as physical sensations, understood the mathematical relationships that govern the motion of particles at quantum levels. But more than technical data, she experienced something like emotion from the entities in the unknown aircraft. Curiosity about humanity's potential, concern about their tendency towards self-destruction, hope that they might develop sufficient wisdom to join the galactic community. The entities weren't conquerors or invaders. They were gardeners, carefully tending to the growth of consciousness throughout the cosmos. "My God," Vasquez whispered, as the full implications of the contact became clear. "They're trying to help us." The interface lasted only seconds in objective time, but Vasquez felt as though she'd experienced years of accelerated learning. When it ended, the unknown aircraft began moving away, their forms becoming increasingly translucent until they faded completely from both visual and radar contact. "Ghost Lead, report status," came Aurora's voice. "Callisto, Ghost Lead is. I'm different. I understand things I shouldn't understand. I can see patterns in electromagnetic fields, predict atmospheric changes at the molecular level. What did they do to me?" "They gave you a gift, Elena. The same gift they gave me 27 years ago. You've been selected as a liaison, someone who can help humanity navigate the transition to cosmic citizenship. Welcome to a very exclusive club." The debriefing at Nellie's took place in a room that didn't appear on any base schematics, accessible only through corridors that required clearances that most military personnel didn't know existed. Major Vasquez sat across from Aurora, her mind still reeling from the contact experience. The enhanced perceptions hadn't faded. If anything, they were becoming stronger, more integrated into her normal consciousness. "The disorientation will pass," Aurora said, studying readouts from medical sensors that were monitoring Vasquez's brain activity. "Your neural pathways are adapting to process information at quantum scales. It's like learning to see new colors that don't have names yet." Dr. Elizabeth Reardon, the Pentagon's specialist in consciousness studies, looked up from her tablet. The EEG patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Major Vasquez is showing synchronized activity across brain regions that normally don't communicate directly. It's as if the contact created new neural connections at the cellular level. Vasquez rubbed her temples, trying to process the flood of sensory input that threatened to overwhelm her enhanced consciousness. She could feel the electromagnetic fields generated by every piece of electronic equipment in the room, sense the gravitational distortions caused by aircraft moving overhead, perceive patterns in radio frequencies that revealed the emotional states of personnel throughout the base. "How do you function with all this awareness?" she asked Aurora. "You learn to filter," Aurora replied. "The enhanced perception is a tool, not a curse. With practice, you can focus on specific aspects of the data stream while allowing others to remain in background processing. Think of it as developing new senses rather than losing old ones." Colonel Webb leaned forward, his expression serious. "What we need to understand is the strategic implications. If these entities are evaluating humanity for membership in some kind of interstellar organization, what criteria are they using? What determines whether we pass or fail their assessment?" Aurora was quiet for a moment, accessing memories from her own contact experience decades earlier. "They're measuring our ability to transcend tribalism without losing individual identity. Most species that reach our level of technological development destroy themselves through resource wars or ideological conflicts. The few that survive do so by developing collective consciousness while maintaining personal autonomy." "And if we fail their evaluation?" Dr. Reardon asked. "They withdraw their subtle guidance and let us proceed on our own," Aurora replied. "Based on their observations of similar species, that usually means extinction within a few centuries. Nuclear war, environmental collapse, or technological disasters that spiral beyond control." The weight of species-level responsibility settled over the room. Every decision made by Earth's governments and military organizations was now part of a cosmic examination that would determine humanity's survival. The electromagnetic probes, the careful observation of human responses to advanced technology, the selection of specific individuals for enhanced consciousness, all of it was part of an assessment process that had been ongoing for decades. "So what's our next move?" Webb asked. Aurora stood and moved to the holographic display, calling up star charts that showed trajectory patterns extending far beyond the solar system. "We prove that humanity can handle the responsibilities that come with cosmic citizenship. The evaluators will continue their assessment, gradually increasing the complexity of their tests. Our job is to demonstrate wisdom, cooperation, and the ability to think beyond planetary limitations." She highlighted a region of space where the patterns converged. "In approximately 6 months, they'll initiate the final phase of the evaluation. Representatives from multiple species will arrive to directly observe human society and make their final determination about our readiness for integration." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. First contact wasn't a single event. It was a process that had been unfolding for years, and humanity's future hung in the balance of decisions that would be made in the coming months. The age of cosmic isolation was ending, and what came next would depend on whether humanity could prove itself worthy of joining a community that spanned the stars. The secure communication facility at Cheyenne Mountain had been repurposed for a conversation that would have been considered impossible just weeks earlier. Aurora sat before a console that had been modified with technology derived from the platform project, her enhanced consciousness allowing her to interface directly with communication systems that operated on principles beyond conventional physics. The entities had agreed to limited direct communication, acknowledging that humanity's evaluation had reached a critical juncture. Their representatives appeared on holographic displays as shifting patterns of light and energy, forms that suggested intelligence without conforming to biological limitations. We greet the consciousness known as Aurora Callisto, came the translation through speakers that converted electromagnetic patterns into recognizable speech. Your species approaches the threshold between planetary existence and cosmic participation. The evaluation period nears completion. Aurora took a deep breath, feeling the weight of representing not just human military interests, but humanity itself. We're honored by your consideration. Our species recognizes that we've been guided in our technological development. We're grateful for that guidance and hope to prove worthy of continued cooperation. Cooperation requires understanding, the entities replied. Your species shows promise, but also concerning tendencies toward fragmentation and conflict. The technologies we would share could advance your civilization by millennia, but they could also be used for destruction on scales that would affect multiple star systems. General Hawkins, listening from the observation room, spoke into her microphone. Ask them about their timeline. When will they make their final determination? Aurora relayed the question, and the response came with images that filled the holographic display. Star charts showing the movement of vessels from multiple solar systems, all converging on Earth's location. Representatives from 17 species will arrive during your planet's next orbital period. They will observe your societies directly, assessing your capacity for wisdom, cooperation, and transcendence of biological limitations. The implications were staggering. Earth would host the largest interstellar gathering in human history, with representatives from civilizations that had successfully made the transition from planetary to cosmic existence. Their observations would determine whether humanity joined their community or faced extinction alone. What can we do to prepare? Aurora asked. Demonstrate unity without uniformity, came the reply. Show that your species can cooperate despite differences, that individual consciousness can coexist with collective responsibility. The representatives will not interfere with your societies, but they will observe everything, your conflicts, your innovations, your capacity for growth. The communication ended with a final message that would be analyzed by linguists and philosophers for years to come. Remember, Aurora Callisto, that consciousness is the only true currency in the cosmos. What your species possesses in awareness, creativity, and wisdom will determine its value to the community of stars. As the holographic display faded, Aurora found herself thinking about the responsibility that had been placed on humanity's shoulders. They weren't just being evaluated for their technological capabilities. They were being assessed as potential contributors to a civilization that spanned multiple galaxies, guardians of consciousness itself, in a universe where intelligence was precious and rare. The next 6 months would determine whether humanity took its place among the stars or faced the darkness of cosmic isolation. The choice, as it had always been, was entirely their own. 6 months later, the skies above Earth began to change. It started with subtle alterations in star positions that astronomers initially attributed to equipment malfunctions. But as reports came in from observatories around the globe, the truth became undeniable. Massive objects were moving through the outer solar system, approaching Earth with technologies that made human space flight seem like primitive fumbling in the dark. Aurora stood in the command center at Nellie's, watching displays that showed the approaching vessels with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Each ship represented a civilization that had successfully navigated the transition from planetary to cosmic existence, species that had learned to balance technological power with wisdom, individual identity with collective responsibility. 17 vessels confirmed, Major Vasquez reported, her enhanced consciousness allowing her to perceive details that conventional sensors missed. The largest is approximately 50 kilometers in length, composed of materials that don't match any known periodic table elements. It's beautiful, like crystallized music given physical form. The ships didn't announce their presence with traditional radio communications. Instead, they broadcast on frequencies that interfaced directly with consciousness itself, sending messages of greeting and peaceful intent to every human mind capable of receiving them. The effect was profound. Across the globe, people reported dreams of flight, visions of worlds beyond imagining, and an overwhelming sense that they were no longer alone in the universe. World leaders struggled to maintain order as the reality of first contact became undeniable. Some nations attempted to prepare military responses, while others called for immediate surrender to what they perceived as overwhelming technological superiority. But the visitors remained at a respectful distance, making no threatening moves, broadcasting only messages of observation and evaluation. They're waiting, Aurora realized, studying the formation patterns of the approaching vessels. They won't interfere with human society directly. The evaluation is about how we respond to their presence, not about their intervention in our affairs. Colonel Webb nodded grimly. Some of the Joint Chiefs are pushing for a preemptive strike. They think if we demonstrate military capability, it'll impress the visitors. That would be exactly the wrong response, Aurora replied. They're looking for evidence of wisdom, not aggression. Any attack would prove that humanity isn't ready for the responsibilities that come with cosmic citizenship. The next weeks would test every aspect of human society. Economic markets fluctuated wildly as the implications of advanced technology became apparent. Religious leaders debated the theological implications of contact with intelligences that had transcended planetary limitations. Scientists worked frantically to understand technologies that operated on principles beyond current physics. But in quiet moments, away from the chaos of global reaction, something beautiful was happening. Children around the world began drawing pictures of spacecraft and alien landscapes with details they couldn't possibly have known. Artists created works that seemed to channel inspiration from sources beyond human experience. Musicians composed symphonies that incorporated mathematical harmonies found in the electromagnetic signatures of the visiting ships. Humanity was changing, touched by contact with intelligences that had learned to see the universe as a single, interconnected system of consciousness and creativity. The evaluation wasn't just about political or military responses. It was about whether humans could evolve beyond their limitations while maintaining the essential qualities that made them unique. As Aurora watched the stars shift with the presence of vessels that carried the hopes and dreams of 17 civilizations, she understood that the true test was just beginning. The next phase of the evaluation would determine not just humanity's survival, but its role in shaping the future of consciousness throughout the cosmos. The first direct landing occurred at dawn over the Sahara Desert, chosen for its isolation from major population centers and its symbolic significance as the birthplace of human migration. The vessel that descended was smaller than the massive ships orbiting Earth, but its design spoke of technologies that existed at the intersection of engineering and art, science and philosophy. Aurora stood with a carefully selected group of representatives from various Earth governments, scientists, philosophers, and artists, as the craft settled onto the sand with no visible means of support. Its hull seemed to shift between states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, occasionally disappearing entirely before reforming in patterns that suggested intelligence beyond biological constraints. "Remember," Aurora said quietly to the assembled group, "they're not here to negotiate or establish diplomatic relations in any traditional sense. They're here to observe how we respond to direct contact with truly advanced consciousness. Every word, every gesture, every thought will be part of their assessment." The vessel's hull rippled, and a section dissolved to reveal an interior that seemed larger than the ship's external dimensions. 3 figures emerged, their forms shifting between states that approximated human appearance and configurations that challenged perception itself. They moved with a grace that suggested mastery over physical laws, their presence creating patterns in the electromagnetic spectrum that resembled music made visible. "We greet the representatives of Earth consciousness," they said, their words bypassing auditory perception and arriving directly in the listener's minds. We are the observers, chosen to assess your species' readiness for integration into the community of aware beings. Dr. Maria Santos, representing Earth's scientific community, stepped forward with visible nervousness. We're honored by your presence. Our species has many questions about the universe and our place in it. Questions indicate growth potential, the lead observer replied. But wisdom comes from understanding that some questions can only be answered through direct experience of expanded consciousness. Your species stands at the threshold between isolation and integration, between planetary thinking and cosmic awareness. The conversation that followed would be studied by philosophers and theologians for generations to come. The observers didn't provide technological specifications or star maps. Instead, they spoke of consciousness as the fundamental force that shaped reality, of creativity as the engine that drove cosmic evolution, of the responsibility that came with awareness of the universe's interconnected nature. Your species shows remarkable diversity of thought and expression, one observer noted, its form shifting to display patterns that seem to reflect the emotional states of the humans present. But you also demonstrate concerning tendencies toward fragmentation and conflict. The technologies we possess could eliminate scarcity, extend consciousness beyond biological limitations, and enable exploration of dimensions beyond physical space. But such powers require wisdom to use responsibly. Aurora found herself speaking without conscious decision, her words emerging from the enhanced consciousness that had been awakened by her contact with their technology years earlier. We understand the responsibility. We know that power without wisdom leads to destruction, that technology without consciousness becomes a tool for domination rather than liberation. We're asking not for your gifts, but for the opportunity to prove ourselves worthy of them. The observers stood silent for long moments, their forms shifting through configurations that suggested deep contemplation. Finally, they spoke. The evaluation continues. We will observe your species for one orbital cycle, watching how you respond to the knowledge of our presence, how you adapt to the reality of cosmic community, how you balance individual desires with collective responsibility. The final determination will be made by consensus among all 17 evaluating species. As they returned to their vessel and departed for the orbital stations, Aurora felt the weight of species-level destiny settling on her shoulders. Humanity had been given 1 year to prove itself worthy of joining a community that spanned the stars, to demonstrate that they could transcend their limitations without losing their essential humanity. The cosmic interview had begun. The year that followed would later be known as the transformation period, 12 months during which humanity grappled with the reality that they were being evaluated for membership in a galactic community. The observers maintained their distant watch, their vessels visible to the naked eye as new stars in the night sky, their presence a constant reminder that Earth's future hung in the balance. Major Elena Vasquez had been promoted to colonel and placed in charge of coordinating military responses to the ongoing evaluation. Her enhanced consciousness, a gift from her contact with the observer technology, allowed her to perceive patterns that conventional analysis missed. She found herself serving as translator between human military thinking and the cosmic perspective that the observers represented. The key is understanding that they're not evaluating our military capabilities, she explained to a gathering of NATO commanders. They're assessing our potential for responsible stewardship of advanced technologies. Every weapons test, every aggressive posture, every demonstration of force is being interpreted as evidence of our maturity level. Some nations had responded to the observer presence with fear, increasing military spending and developing new weapons systems in preparation for potential conflict. Others had embraced the opportunity for advancement, establishing research programs designed to reverse engineer observer technologies. But a growing number had begun to recognize that the evaluation wasn't about technological or military capability. It was about wisdom, cooperation, and the ability to transcend planetary limitations. Children born during the transformation period showed unusual abilities. They displayed enhanced spatial reasoning, intuitive understanding of mathematical concepts that typically required years of study, and most remarkably, a natural ability to perceive electromagnetic patterns that suggested the development of new sensory capabilities. Scientists called it evolutionary acceleration, the species adapting to the presence of advanced consciousness in ways that transcended normal genetic processes. Aurora found herself traveling the world, speaking to governments, universities, and international organizations about the true nature of the evaluation. Her message was consistent. Humanity's future depended not on impressing the observers with technological or military achievements, but on demonstrating the wisdom to use advanced capabilities responsibly. They've seen thousands of species reach our level of development, she explained to the United Nations General Assembly. Most destroy themselves within a few centuries of achieving interplanetary travel. The few that survive do so by learning to balance individual consciousness with collective responsibility, by developing technologies that enhance rather than replace human creativity, by recognizing that consciousness itself is the most precious resource in the universe. The observers continued their silent watch, their vessels serving as both promise and warning. Humanity stood at the threshold between cosmic citizenship and eternal isolation, and the choice was entirely their own. The enhanced individuals, Aurora, Alina, and a growing number of others who had experienced direct contact, served as bridges between human limitations and cosmic possibilities, translating between species-level thinking and galactic consciousness. As the evaluation year progressed, patterns emerged that would determine humanity's fate. The question wasn't whether humans could develop advanced technology. They'd already proven that capability. The question was whether they could develop the wisdom to use such technology without destroying themselves or threatening other species in the process. The answer would come not from governments or military leaders, but from the collective demonstration of human consciousness, evolving towards something greater than the sum of its individual parts. The final,